All right, so how are you doing, Josh?
Hanging in there for the most part, just, taking it day by day. How are you two?
Good.
Yeah, pretty well. We're really excited about upcoming concert, and we got some beautiful music that you've written, showcasing some other premieres. And yeah, the big one, I think, our feature for this concert is the hymn to nature that you wrote, and it was cool to have one piece that has all five of us on that.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really looking forward to your concert as well. Thanks for having me today for this interview. Of
Yeah, thank you for coming and talking to us. So
course.
let's talk about your piece, Hymn to Nature. Uh, we commissioned this by you, and it's for open instrumentation. So do you want to tell us about how your process is for writing a piece like that?
Sure. In my experience, at least, flex music is still relatively new to me. At the time I started writing this work, I had been writing for this particular genre for a couple months, and actually most of my experience up to that point had been arranging pre-existing band works of my own by a couple friends and things like that. But flex music really started to become much more needed, I would say, or there was a large demand for it, at least when the pandemic hit, because composers, music educators, teachers, we just didn't know what live music was going to look like in the middle of all this, what it was going to look like safely, or in the case of the classroom at least, how many students were going to show up every day for a music class if it was safe to even do that. So this flex music idea was, as you said, Ava, just writing for an open instrumentation where um, the intent is that almost anyone can cover like any of the specific parts that were required to perform that work or things like that of that nature. This piece in particular, Meditation and Hymn to Nature, is one of the few compositions that up to this point that I had written specifically for this genre. And when I approached this work, from an instrumentation standpoint, at the very least, first and foremost, what was on my, I wrote this specifically for all of you for the blank experiment for that specific instrumentation. Um, but in the back of my mind, as I was approaching this, I knew that I wanted to create a version of this piece that, again, would open up that accessibility so that almost anyone can cover like any of those main four parts, I think it is. Um, to not restrict it to a specific genre or limit who would be able to play it or things like that. The other main conceptual approach that I took with this work was just really trying to do something different amidst all of the music that I had written up to that point during the pandemic. I was one of those composers that when everything shut down and the pandemic began, I actually threw myself in my work and never stopped writing music and never really stopped composing. And I think my thought process at the time was writing with the hope that we were all going to be able to one day come back together again safely and be able to perform, music like this or things like that. Now I realize that was probably far more detrimental to my mental health than just really taking a break. And to be honest with you, work-life balance is something that I really, really struggle with now, especially because of everything that's going on in the world right now with this pandemic. This piece in particular, I wanted to take a different approach and just write something that would be calmer, that would, strive to find some sense of peace and serenity and basically just exist as a piece for healing, really. Something that um, encourages, self care, individually speaking, or tries to um, express these ideas that, whoever listens to this, just remember that you're loved and you matter and things like that. And even though things seem bleak right now, at some point we will uh, be done with this pandemic. This pandemic will be over if we take the right steps to for ourselves and for our community and things like that too. So really, my biggest goal with this piece was just to do something much more optimistic and positive, and just again strive for that sense of peace.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I can definitely, see that looking back on playing this piece. It was very meditative, as is in the title, meditation and hymn, hymn to nature. So I want to ask, when you put nature in the title, do you see nature as the person listening to the piece and playing the piece, their mentality, or is it like nature as in the world, the world around us? Or
I
neither of those?
think, I think, and I think you're gonna get this answer. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. I think you're gonna get a different answer no matter who you ask this. But in terms of my approach with this, I sort of considered all of those things really. Um, the perspective of someone who might be sitting in this space really where they're hearing this music, where they're meditating on these moments in their life or something like that. I was considering that, but I was also considering the fact that all of you would be performing this work, and what sort of conversations could stem from that really as you're performing the work or you're rehearsing it or whatnot. I was thinking it from the musician standpoint as well, in terms of the soundscape really that was created, the environment that all of you were immersed in when performing this piece, or when somebody, or for somebody who was listening to it. So I think nature in that respect is sort of an open-ended question in a way. It could be us individually, it could be our species, it could be life and existence as a whole, the planet that we live on, how we need to take care of it and respect our environments and whatnot. It could be all of these things, and it could also just be maybe as simple as, again, taking the time for yourself and just um, giving yourself that chance and that opportunity to take some self-care if you're able to do so and whatnot. So I think the piece in retrospect sort of reflects on all of that in a way.
I like that. It's very holistic. It's
It's
getting like Veros.
yeah. I have to be honest, holistic approaches to something I've been exploring for about a year now. I have at the time that I wrote this piece, I was also writing a symphony on top of this that, um, pending on how things with the pandemic develops, will hopefully be premiered in December of this year. And that piece also explores a lot of holistic ideas and whatnot, because one of our guest artists for it is a sound healing practitioner and whatnot. So yeah, there's been a lot of holistic ideas I've been exploring lately. That's very fair to say.
Yeah, I kind of like how that ties into the flexible instrumentation aspect of it. So it's just like it's not tied down to any one thing. We can kind of apply it to, what we need at that moment, whether it's, philosophically, emotionally, or even just practically, what instruments do we have access to. So it's just kind of cool how it's just a very open-ended but really beautiful, peaceful piece. It was so much fun to play when we were able just to blend the instruments together. It wasn't technically demanding, so we could really just focus on, the musicality of it. So it's nice to have those pieces as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really great to hear. And I agree with all of that too. Um, this piece was written at a very specific level because I wanted to approach it in a way that would be accessible for most schools that may still be looking for flex music at this point. I didn't want to write something that was going to be difficult for the sake of being difficult, thereby rendering it inaccessible or things like that. And to tell you the truth, after all these experiences I've had writing and arranging flex music now, I think it's a genre that's going to continue to be needed and that will probably stay for the rest of my lifetime at least. And it's something I'm going to continue to advocate for at least, for this level of music and for more advanced works and this middle ground and whatnot too. So
I love that.
No, it's good. It makes the music very approachable to audiences and performers.
thanks. Yeah, that was my one hope too writing this. Being able to create music that is able to do all of that, but isn't necessarily too static, if that makes any sense. Something that still has like a sense of direction, however you may interpret that.
Mm-hmm.
So
And so we also performed your piece Song, which was for harp and bassoon. And Danielle, I know when you and Maya were playing it, I like sat in the audience, or our audience, and I just thought it was beautiful. It was like in rehearsals, I would just look up and be like away from my cell phone so that I could listen to you guys playing. So what did you think about playing that piece?
Yeah, it was really beautiful. I loved how the instruments blended together, and harp and bassoon isn't a common duo, but the way that we really shared, the melodic role, and we're able just to blend together, it worked so well. And I think I'd mentioned to you earlier, I think my favorite thing about the piece is that the phrases don't necessarily go in the direction you expect them. So you think it's going to resolve one way, but it goes, somewhere completely different. I think that was my favorite part of playing the piece. It kind of kept me on my toes just to keep, moving with the music and flowing. Just like it was a um, really interesting experience. And I loved, how the two instruments really blended together. You really took advantage of, the full range of the bassoon, full range of the harp, and those pairings. It was just beautiful.
Thank you. That's really great to hear. Um, so this song for Bassoon and Harp was commissioned by a couple of colleagues that I knew from Michigan State that for a couple of years had played together, and they were called Harpoon Duet. And my approach with the piece was actually, in a lot of ways, pretty similar to the approach that I'd ended up taking for meditation and hymn to nature. Kind of looking back on it, it's a little bit surreal. It's my commissions at the time were again all of this active and difficult and energetic music and things like that. And while this piece does have some sense of energy to it, I wanted to, similar with the meditation piece, I wanted to just take a step back and write something different, and write something that was a little more lyrical and just maybe something in a way that allowed the music to just be whatever it wanted to be. And what I do remember about writing this work is that it felt like my approach took a very stream of consciousness pattern, really, in the sense that, like you said, Danielle, the intent was that there was a sense of direction to it, but you're not really sure where it's going to go next.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very much on my mind while I was writing it, because I wanted to see what I could do to explore these different colors and patterns between bassoon and harp and whatnot too.
So the title is Song, and I feel like all of my music history classes are like telling me, oh, call it a piece and not a song. So I just want to know, is there any background to that title?
I gotta be honest, not really. No. Not in a concrete sense. I think the year that I wrote that piece was around the time I was beginning to be interested in writing for more abstract ideas, or just specific emotions or states of mind, or this idea of change and how it affects us, how we view it as a society and whatnot, which you see a lot of in this piece. There is quite a lot of change, even though themes and motives are brought back and whatnot. But the actual title itself sort of alludes to the fact that the piece is really a song without words. I mean, there's no singer, there's no lyrics, there's no text that inspired it or things like that. It's just this conversation again between bassoon and harp. It's, in a way, it's sort of like a soliloquy, really, if that's the right word, between these two instruments. But the approach I took with writing it was one where I imagined that both of them were still singing no matter what. Like, there's no argument, there's no major philosophical discussion or things like that. It's just really this nice conversation between these two instruments and their viewpoints and how that comes together in a sense. So I think a lot of that has also to do with that sense of experimentation with that color, in a way.
Yeah, and as the performer, it does feel very song-like. So when I saw song, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense, because it really is based around, a melodic line. It's not, the focus of the piece isn't, the rhythms or the harmonies. It's really this, really beautiful vocal melody that just comes back and back throughout the piece. So song, I think, is the perfect title for it.
Thanks. Yeah, and that was definitely very much on my mind too. And there is still intricate rhythm in this
Yeah,
underneath
absolutely.
all of that. Yeah,
We had fun
underneath all of
rehearsing that
melody.
part of it.
Oh, I'm sure.
You kept us on our toes there.
Yeah, my music tended to do quite a bit of that back then, and you know what? I think most of it still does now, to tell you the truth. But there is still a sense of rhythm in this, but instead of wanting to focus on that, as you mentioned, I wanted it to feel very flowing and organic, in a way that having it there actually makes sense, as opposed to just throwing it in there for the sake of just, being cool or things like that. It's some textural thing that makes sense to what the music was trying to be and whatnot.
Oh, it makes sense, like even from a very practical standpoint, when we were rehearsing this, the way that we worked through some of the rhythmic challenges was just by focusing, on the melody, on the direction, where it was going, and that's how the rhythm all came together, rather than trying to think of it, piece by piece, put a puzzle together. It was just thinking about the whole overarching melodic direction. So
Yeah, definitely, that makes sense. Phrasing was a big thing for me writing this piece too, and it was something that I worked on quite a bit while I was working on this particular chamber piece. It was something that I struggled with a little bit back then, and it was something that I really, really focused on while writing this work, because I wanted the phrasing and the shaping of this to be the best that it could possibly be. And I wanted to be able to walk away from finishing this piece and delivering it to the commissioners and whatnot with a sense of knowing that there was nothing else that needed to be added to it, that it was what it needed to be, and that it functioned really without any sense of lack of phrasing or missing a bar or a single chord or note or things like that.
Yeah, we definitely felt that too. It felt very complete. Just really encompassed everything. It was, I don't know, I just keep saying it's beautiful, but it really was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it means a lot
to hear. Yeah. So is there anything else that you would like the audience to know about either of your works?
I think the only thing I would say is about both of these pieces is that looking back on the compositional process for this, it was certainly, in both cases, it was certainly a different approach that I took with writing these works than other pieces that I was working on at the time around this. And I think that shows a little bit in music, if I'm not speaking too much of myself in that sense. But in another respect, I hope that it's, when you listen to this, that what you take away is looking through on your own experiences, really, and just having a sense of introspection, reflecting on where your life is at the moment, where it has progressed, and where you think it would go, or where you'd like for it to go, whatever your hopes and aspirations and dreams may be and whatnot. And really, when you listen to this work, to just take a moment and just try and find a sense of peace, if you can. Just focus on the moment, really, as opposed to worrying about the next thing or the thing after that. Just taking a moment to find a sense of peace and balance, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope that all of our listeners enjoy hearing your pieces, Song for Harp and Bassoon, and Meditation and Hymn to Nature for Open Instrumentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both.